Some of my work was supported by an industry consortium. So it was a collection of companies involved in the semiconductor industry, specifically materials suppliers and manufacturers. And they're very interested in the characteristics of thin film materials that serve as the basis for integrated circuit technology. And some of the picosecond and femtosecond laser technologies that we were developing for studying chemical reaction events turned out to be very well suited for characterizing the properties of these incredibly thin, nanometer thick films that are used as functional materials in semiconductors. And so we developed ways to use those lasers to characterize the fundamental properties of those films, which turned out to be very important for process control in semiconductor manufacturing. And so that allowed me to sort of understand and appreciate, a potential connection between the academic research that we were doing and an industry need in inline process control. And so I took 6 years to graduate with a PhD, but that last year, I basically had all my research done. So we took some time to establish an undergraduate course based on these laser-based approaches we have developed. And we also entered a business plan competition. And so back then, that was 95, I think. And MIT, I think, was probably one of the only places, if not the only place, that had business plan competition back in those ancient times. It's pretty ubiquitous these days. But back at MIT, and that was during the first Bush administration, which, it was a disaster in terms of the economy, and a lot of the MIT kids were thinking about alternative career paths. It wasn't a lot of hiring happening in traditional, large companies. There's a lot of thought around startups, and so perfect timing for that. And we entered the business plan competition and went through the entire year. So the first year was all about the executive summary. And then they had a judging panel consisting of prominent VCs in the Boston area. And so they were evaluating the executive summary, down to 10 finalists. And then the second semester, you write the full business plan. And so we teamed up with MBA students at Sloan School. We had the industry connection. We knew what the needs were. We sort of scoped it out, did all of the market assessment and stuff like that. And so we made it all the way to the very final stage of the competition, which involved a public pitch presentation to basically the entire MIT community. So it was like the Super Bowl, at MIT. It's like everybody's paying attention to this. So we did not win, unfortunately. We got very close. We were second place. But the interesting thing is that provided a launching opportunity for starting a real company, because you had the VCs. They were already looking at the business plan. They knew what you were doing. They were interested. They put capital into it. And we launched the company in summer of 1995, and then we were acquired in full by Philips, the electronics company, in summer of 1998. And so it was a tremendous economic windfall for everybody involved. And so I thought, wow, let's try to do that again somehow, that type of thing. So that's
easy.
kind of what got. Yeah, I know. It was like beginner's luck or something like that. But anyway, that kind of got me hooked on it, and I did a postdoc at Harvard with George Whitesides, a really famous academician who does this kind of thing, and that really reinforced my ideas around what I try to do for my own career. And then thinking about career options, it could have gone to faculty position. Back in those days, Bell Labs was the absolute mecca for semiconductor technology, optics, materials, everything. Murray Hill facility where the transistor was invented, and the solar cell, and the fiber optic cable and information theory, all this stuff. And so I had the opportunity to go there. And my thought was, you go to Bell Labs, you can do, again, like I said, sort of strive toward Nobel Prize winning science, but you're embedded in a technology company that has challenges they're trying to solve. And that's why the transistor was invented at Bell Labs and not in an academic institution, because it was science in the context of solving problems. And so I thought that would be a great environment to be in, because you could do technology development, you could launch products, that would be a lot of fun, but you don't have to, find a CEO and get space and raise that was stripped away. You wouldn't have to understand the market because the company itself understands the market. So we're going to streamline that process. And I think I'd still be at Bell Labs today if it didn't basically collapse around 2000, 2001 due to the telecom bubble bursting. But it was a great environment. It was a great start for my own independent career, and eventually kind of came back to an academic situation, but trying to maintain that kind of Bell Labs sort of mindset and doing the translation through entrepreneurship as opposed to, leveraging the internal capabilities of a parent company.
And we skipped over your interest in bioelectronics. So maybe if you'd like to talk a little bit about what sparked your initial interest. You obviously had gone to Bell Labs, but a big portion of your startup companies today, if you look at them, have a fundamental basis in bioelectronics. Do you want to talk about where that interest came from?
Yeah, I can do that. I hope this isn't kind of boring history, but anyway, let me go through it quickly. So when I went to Bell Labs, there was a pre-existing effort around flexible electronics, and there was a group of chemists and physicists working on organic alternatives to silicon for printable electronics. You put on a flexible sheet of plastic, maybe you print it out with an inkjet printer, maybe it'd be super low cost technology, or maybe like a flexible display technology. And I got involved in that because some of the techniques we had developed when I was at Harvard were very well matched to the kind of requirements for that sort of technologies. I got involved with that team, not the only thing I was doing at Bell Labs, but one of the more prominent things, and we got interested in that. And so then when I moved to University of Illinois, there was a lot of military interest in thinking about flexible electronics, not for displays or low-cost items, but for high-performance, military-grade, deployable systems where that thin, flexible plastic platform could be lightweight. You could fold it up, put it in a backpack, large area steerable antennas for communications on the battlefield, for example. So we got a lot of funding from DARPA almost immediately after I started at University of Illinois. So it was great timing, built up my group very quickly, but focus on high performance. So thinking about alternatives to the kind of low performance organic materials that we're working on at Bell Labs to enable sort of high-speed systems, communications, X-ray detectors, different things like that. And so we got started with that. I was then invited, about a year after we started the DARPA program, invited to give a talk in the Department of Electrical Engineering at University of Pennsylvania. The College of Engineering at UPenn is co-located with the College of Medicine. And so I was giving a talk in the Department of Electrical Engineering, a lot of interest, flexible electronics, can't remember the title, something like that, like macroelectronics, I think is what we were talking about at that time. Large area systems, flexible, high performance, military. And what I didn't know at the time is a couple of the neuroscientists, neurological surgeons actually from the medical school saw the advertisement for this talk and decided it was interesting enough. They came to the presentation. They were sitting in the back. I didn't know where they were there. I was sort of answering the questions at the end of the talk. And then, getting ready to leave, these guys approached me, Brian Lidd and John Viventi, and they said, hey, this flexible electronics stuff is really cool. We work on the human brain, and we do surgeries on patients with epilepsy, and we try to map the electrical activity to identify the regions of the brain that have to be resected for conditions associated with epilepsy that are non-responsive to drugs. And they asked me, have you ever thought about putting your flexible electronic systems on the surface of the brain to monitor brain activity? I thought, wow, that is really cool. We should probably do that. And so I went back, talked to my students. They were super interested in that. And then Brian talked to his cardiology colleagues at UPenn. They want to put it on the heart. Other guys want to put it on the spinal cord and the peripheral and all of these different things. And so that really led to a pivot. And so I wanted to pivot, but I think more importantly, my students were more interested in working on flexible electronics in the context of human health rather than military. There's nothing wrong with military, but just the students. And so I think when you're running an academic group, you think you're in charge, but really the students are in charge, because the students who are most passionate and most productive work at a high level, and it basically gradually shifts your direction to align with their interests. And so it was a good thing that my interests were aligned with theirs, and that's what allowed the pivot to bioelectronics. And so that's remained a focus ever since.
Yeah, it's great. So I remember the first time, you're not going to remember this, but I remember the first time I met you. It was a little bit of almost like a magic show, because you had all of these things on you and all of these different bioelectronic sensors. You're like, wait, I can show you this. Wait, I can show you this. Wait, I can show you this. So I just remember being in awe the first time I met you.
You have stuff. Yeah.
Right. I'm sure you do, right? I know your shtick. So, but so we're gonna transition a little bit to innovation and research focus. Am I right? Am I right? I called that. So your lab has now created these skin-like wearable devices, and I love the backstory around sort of transitioning to the students' interest around health, and you've got this hospital level accuracy, and you talked about, the original problem you were trying to solve around reading signals from the brain, but what were some of those original problems that you were trying to solve that now have really spawned a whole, portfolio of companies?
Yeah. So, we got started with Brian and John Vivinti. John is now on the faculty at Duke University, still collaborate with him, collaborate with Brian, still at University of Pennsylvania, others. So those are interesting applications. Like we're in Urbana, we don't have access to a medical school. We can continue, and we did continue to work with the UPenn folks, but they have animal models, large and small animal. They have all the facilities. We didn't have that. And so then we're like looking around, well, this is cool. Like, what can we do here in Urbana in our own labs? And then you're looking around at the skin, like how about, let's put on the skin. We can't get access to the brain, but we put on the skin, low risk, and maybe you could do something there. And so back to DARPA again, I was on the Defense Science Research Council, which is a group of, elite, I guess, academics doing brainstorming activity to inform DARPA program managers about new funding opportunities. And so I led a working group, a year-long study group on what kind of technologies would be important for monitoring war fighter health status, for not only more effectively deploying that resource based on fatigue and readiness and things like that, but also doing battlefield triage around injuries that are happening. And so we pitched some ideas around what we thought would be the ideal technology for that sort of application, and we decided the model would be something that looks more like a kid's temporary tattoo. So it would offer imperceptible levels of integration, no burden on the warfighter. You could place the devices wherever you need them across the body, and then you could use that intimate skin interface to monitor underlying physiological processes with clinical grade accuracy to provide data streams that could inform a commander, or a military medic on, what is the best course of action in a given scenario. So we pitched that. That turned out to be, interesting, and we thought about it. The question, and that was 2008, by the way, and so just to set the time scale, there was no commercial wearable technology at all. That segment did not exist. The Fitbit Flex was launched in 2013. So this is pretty early. And that's what DARPA is set up to do, thinking about like over the horizon type of stuff, which is good. So we went back at University of Illinois and figured out kind of how to do that, published it in 2011, and then immediately launched a company. And so this was VC-funded company in the Cambridge area, because there's still a lot of MIT connections, VC community from the company I mentioned before, and a lot of contacts to technical talent there. So launched it there. Urbana, it's hard to do it there, but that was MC10, so it was funded by a number of prominent VC firms in the Boston area. We converted the technology that we published in 2011 into a more manufacturable form, got FDA approval for cardiopulmonary monitoring. This was around 2014, I think. So 2011 was the paper, 2014 FDA approval is working well. But there were two issues with that company. It was eventually acquired by Metadata in fall of 2021 for digital clinical trial support. But what we had envisioned is a technology could be used on every patient in every hospital, maybe following patients after discharge into the home so they could be monitored clinical grade accuracy by physicians with the patient in a home setting for a cost benefit, also benefit to the patient. That was our vision. But it didn't work for two reasons. One is, and these sort of lessons learned, one is the company that we put together is basically an engineering team. We had no medical expertise within the company, no MDs. We had nobody who knew anything about reimbursement, clinical workflows, nurses interface, user interface, patient compliance. We didn't know anything about that. Also, because it was 2014, it was too early. There was no ability for hospital systems to ingest the massive amounts of data that were coming off of the devices. Like, what are you going to do with all of that, right? You got to develop insights, like actionable insights from all of that. And there was just not, the the market was not ready for it. Now, luckily, we found that there was a business in the pharma industry because they want to do digital clinical trials. That's what we ended up doing. But it didn't really sort of materialize at that more grander level that we had aspired to when we started the company. So that was kind of a sort of interesting lesson learned. And it was the catalyzing event for me thinking about moving from University of Illinois, which was fantastic, great engineering departments across the board, fantastic collaborators, no medical school. And so I decided we want to do things in this space. We got to get co-located with a medical school, like the guys at University of Pennsylvania. And so looking at different opportunities, a number of circumstances came together, and so kind of relocated here at Northwestern. It's been blowout success in terms of that clinical engagement. So you think you have a technology, you don't really know what you have until it's on patients, and nurses are using it, and patients are experiencing it, and you're seeing how it fits into the workflow. So I think that's really essential for any kind of productive translational activity in this space.
Yeah, so maybe you can share specifically an example of where a clinician or patient feedback influenced a major design decision in your work. Maybe an opportunity from once you made the move up to Northwestern.
Yeah, so one of the reasons for a lot of reasons for the move, but one was that we were already starting to collaborate with Amy Poller, who is head of dermatology here at Northwestern, and her background is in pediatric dermatology, very familiar with the NICU and the PICU setting at Lurie Children's Hospital. And so we have this kind of unique technology, and then we're looking around like, we can do all of these things. What's the most compelling class of patient that could benefit from this technology? And I was invited to give a keynote presentation at the American Society for Dermatologists, and I gave the presentation not really knowing what would be the most, compelling opportunity, but Amy was in the audience. She's a prominent member of that community. So she came up to me after the presentation and said, hey, we should work together to think about this wireless technology for premature babies. And so that was kind of an obvious thing.
I mean, if you look at a picture of a child in the NICU and what the opportunity is post dewiring them,
right.
It's really a huge benefit. So.
Yeah. So we were able to do that. We established collaboration with Aaron Honvas, who's head of the Department of Neonatology at Lurie Children's, and Debbie Weissmeyer and Susan Slattery. A lot of folks there, and the nurses and stuff, and you kind of interact with them and figure things out and go through the IRB, get devices on patients, establish sort of clinical grade accuracy relative to predicates. There was just kind of reproducing the predicate measurements that are done with wired-based systems and expensive electronics. And the adhesive tapes are a big deal also because the skin is very fragile. You apply, you remove. So anyway, there were a number of sort of requirements there for application in Lurie Children's. And then I can talk to you about how it evolved into a company, because all of that was just university research with a strong translational bent.
I think it's a great setup for the next part of this discussion, which is, okay, your areas of research. You can tell that John has a very inquisitive and intellectually driven mind, intellectually curiosity, and so a lot of this resulted in research and translating research from the bench and with his students. But then at some point, you had an early experience at MIT that turned into a successful exit. But you've now created this lab at Northwestern, and you're looking at all of these opportunities being developed by all of the different people in your lab working with you, the students. When do you know that one of these opportunities has merit and that you should actually start to think about forming a company? And what are some of the telltale signs that you look for, and maybe how to translate that from benchtop to actual commercial, starting to work towards potential commercialization?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'll share my own experiences, but again, with the caveat that I'm not trying to be prescriptive in this. Everybody, you guys have as much experience as I do in many cases, but I guess we're not in a mindset of trying to push technologies out. Maybe it's just the kind of benefit of being in an academic, scenario. we don't feel rushed to figure out, what is the business plan, what's going on. So we basically wait until we have overwhelming inbound interest in a technology that we publish. So, we publish something, in many cases, it captures the interest of the popular press, it becomes visible, across, the country and stuff. And if there are partners or investors or individuals who see value in that, then they're calling me up. I mean, that's the extent of our business development effort, is like me answering the phone or answering the email. This is basically it. So for the neonatal devices, we were contacted by, again, it was published, highlighted in the news, all this kind of stuff. And then, I was contacted by program managers at the Gates Foundation and the Save the Children Foundation, and their interest was in taking the technology, adapting it for economically viable use in lower and middle income countries where there's no monitoring technology at all. That's what they wanted to do. And they wanted to put massive resources behind that. So, 5, 10 million, kind of in that range. And it sounded like a pretty compelling, kind of exciting opportunity. It was going to outstrip anything, though, that I could do with my grad students and postdocs, because they're talking about deploying into various countries in Africa and scaling and thinking about manufacturing and reuse and all these kinds of things you don't have to worry about if you're thinking about application in Lurie Children's Hospital, because all the sensors used in that kind of scenario today are just single use, just throw them away. You don't even think about the cost, because the cost of care in a NICU overwhelms the cost of any kind of device that's being used. But now you have to think about it in a totally different way. So that was an example, almost compelled. Okay, if we want to do this thing with Gates, Save the Children, and then it was Steel Foundation, and subsequent to that is GE and Draeger. They wanted to form partnerships. So we're like, got to start a company, that was the thing. And with the other things that we've launched, very similar, and I could go through the different scenarios. We're really launching when we almost have to launch if we want to take the technology to the next level. So we have partner, we have funding, we have mechanisms, we have channel partners, and we do it that way.
Yeah, maybe if a couple of your successes, which are there are many. Maybe talk about the partnership with the sunscreen and how that worked and someone found that opportunity, and then maybe talk about the relationship with Gatorade. I mean, talk through a couple of those just so people get a scope. And by the way, I would say it's pretty unique that you wait for people to call you. That's the opposite scenario than I think most entrepreneurs who are like pounding the streets. And I think that's because of the reputation that you've built and the quality of the research coming out of your lab, which is a real kudos to you. But in the case of the sunscreen experience, or in the experience with Gatorade, how'd you get contacted, and just tell us a little about those stories.
Yeah, I could tell you about both. Let me just focus on Gatorade. If somebody wants to hear about L'Oreal and disc medicine, I could talk about that as well. So in 2016, we published a paper introducing a concept of a lab-on-a-skin microfluidic device. So like a soft, and I have some of the devices here if you guys are interested in taking a look. It's basically soft microfluidic systems that sort of adhere to the surface of the skin. And we were interested in thinking about, like, how can we measure quantities related to health that go beyond, like, physical parameters like electrocardiograms or temperature, things like that? How do we get access to biochemical information? So we decided, eccrine sweat would be an interesting class of biofluid, not very well explored, hard to, collect using conventional approaches, maybe as an alternative to blood or interstitial fluid, that type of thing. And so we developed these, like, really soft microfluidic devices that just stick on the surface of the skin, and they can capture pristine sort of microliter volumes of eccrine sweat as it naturally emerges from the skin. And then we have collections of reservoirs and channels and valves, and we can route the sweat around. Then we have colorimetric chemistries that allow us to read out the concentrations of different biomarkers in sweat. So sweat's very rich in biochemical content because the sweat glands themselves are diffusively equilibrated with surrounding interstitial fluid and capillary blood. So there's a lot of information content there. So we published it in end of 2016, December, I think. And then I got a call from and it was covered in the popular press, television shows. It was in Museum of Modern Art, actually, and somebody thought this was art, and so they wanted to feature it in the MoMA in New York City. So anyway, it was pretty visible out there, and it's like time-dependent tattoo or something, like this colorful thing. But anyway, I got a call, and you know, it was, I didn't know, somebody, you know, said, you know, hey, is this John Rogers? Yeah, I'm really interested in this microfluidic, you know, sweat technology. I'm Brett O'Brien. And I said, who's Brett O'Brien? He said, oh, I'm the president of Gatorade. And I'm a Kellogg alum. And I'm pretty close to Northwestern, saw the paper. We want to make a product out of that to pair with Gatorade. And so he came and kicked the tires in the lab, brought a cohort of his. They were running the Gatorade Sports Science Institute in Barrington at that time, so they know a lot about sweat. And they said, hey, we want to make a product. We're willing to put forward non-dilutive capital to help you take the published prototype and convert it into a manufacturable product at a reasonable cost point. And we're going to fund you to do that. And yeah, and so this is the product. I have 3 of these. I'll give these away to the first 3 questions, actually, that come out. So this is the product. We've done 3 million of these things. You can pick them up at Dick's Sporting Goods. You can order them off the web. But what they are devices, again, a flexible microfluidic system, scientifically validated. You put it on your skin, and then there's a kind of a serpentine channel that fills gradually as you sweat. And the extent of filling tells you the amount of sweat that you've lost locally on that part of the body, typically the inner forearm. And then that's calibrated to total water loss associated, full body loss. And then there's a straight channel region that connects to a separate inlet port that has a colorimetric chemistry that responds by color change to the amount of electrolyte that's in your sweat. And so the idea is you put this on, there's an app that goes with it. You take a picture with your smartphone, and it evaluates the extent of filling, tells you how much sweat you've lost at any given point, marathon, for example, and then it tells you what your electrolyte level is. And everybody has a different salinity in their sweat, and that salinity can be affected by diet, seasonality, fitness level, all this sort of stuff. But the idea is you have that information, and now you can figure out what formulation of Gatorade matches your body chemistry in terms of electrolyte level. And it also tells you how much Gatorade you have to drink in order to get you back to where you started.
No wonder Gatorade was interested.
So it's pretty good. You know, they put together, it was a $5-6 million program, but it was stage gated by specific technical metrics that the team had to hit in order to get paid. So it was like 4 milestone payments or something like that. And again, can't do that with an academic group. That's not research. That's real technology development. So again, kind of compelled to start a company. It was fun to work with Gatorade. These have been featured on all kinds of celebrity athletes. They had a commercial spot with Serena Williams, Paul George, Jason Tatum, Lionel Messi was a big one. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of fun, and you know, it's a pretty solid product. It's great for Gatorade. They're not making money off the patch. They're making money off of the brand enhancement and enhanced sales of Gatorade to kind of distinguish it from the other kind of sports beverages that are out there.
Scientific leadership position.
Yeah, that type of thing. Yeah. But the anyway, I got 3 of them. So get ready with your question if you want a free pack. There's 2 in each pack, and they're not cheap actually. We don't set the pricing. So as a company, the company is Epicor Biosystems, like the Intel inside. So they do all the manufacturing of the patches themselves. So they own their own manufacturing line. They provide the patches to Gatorade. Gatorade does the marketing, the packaging, and the channel distribution, and they also determine the pricing to the customer. We define the pricing of the patch to Gatorade. So we're way down on the food chain. So when you see the price that you would pay for those devices, the cost component associated with the patch is a very small fraction of that. You know, you double the price just to get into Dick's Sporting Goods. They want half of the profit. So anyway, it stacks up like that. So the company, at the end of that development sequence, Gatorade gets a time-limited exclusive license, but only for sports and athletics and only for the U.S. So because we were able to leverage that non-dilutive funding, build out a manufacturing line, we now leverage that for applications outside of sports. And so it turns out there's a big opportunity in worker safeties, like the industrial athletes. So they have deals with Chevron, Conoco BP, or ConocoPhillips, BP, Fluor, and others, where sweat loss can really impact cognitive function, and it correlates to workplace injuries, different things like that. So it's a whole different space, a whole different economics associated with that. But Gatorade is the reason why we launched the company.
So, probably one of the more unique things about you is that you're both an entrepreneur and a researcher. And, how do you figure out which hat to wear and when, and how do the two sort of distinct roles inform your decision-making going forward? I tend to view you more as a researcher because that's where I see your eyes light up, right? But I'd love to understand from your perspective how you think about those two roles.
Yeah, I think everybody has to figure out what they're good at, and then you kind of focus on that. And I don't think I would be a great CEO. I mean, it's a different kind of skill set. I'm like CEO of a research group, and there are some similarities, but there are a lot of differences too. So I kind of focus on what I think I'm best at, which is like kind of the academic thing and thinking about new concepts and pushing things as far as you can go in a university setting, but then handing it off to people who are better capable than I am to take it to the next level. So I don't really think of myself as an entrepreneur. I'm involved in entrepreneurial activities, but only really not at a day-to-day operational level in any of these things, but at a deep technical engagement level and kind of a board level, so weighing in on different strategic decisions. But you got to find great people, and I think a CEO is always the toughest one, and you can build a great engineering team. Maybe that's just because that's more kind of in my domain and in my network, but you really have to build a team that's separate, I think, from the university professor, because we have all kinds of other things that we're trying to do. And education is kind of my main mission, is like working with the students and the postdocs to kind of help them in their career and stuff. So I love entrepreneurship. I have some experience with that first company out of MIT. I was definitely in the trenches, kind of working it pretty hard. But the companies that are spinning out of the group these days, somewhat, arm's length, I guess is the way I would say it.
So when you're standing around the water cooler and a fellow researcher within Northwestern walks up to you and says, "John, look at all these amazing things you've done. I'm a researcher and I'm thinking of starting my own, company." What advice do you have for them?
I would say, again, this is just my personal experience, my own advice, and other people would have other, types of recommendations, I guess. I feel like you want to keep things in kind of a research academic setting as long as you possibly can. And if you have any sort of known problems or challenges that need to be overcome with your technology, it's very dangerous to think you're going to throw it over the fence and have some other guys figure it out, and they're going to work on it in maybe a more professional way. But I think that rarely works. So we try to advance the technology to the highest level of sort of TRL level, I guess, that we can before starting a company. Because once you've done that, the clock is ticking. You have, really significant salaries you have to support, and you have to worry about the runway. It's just a really daunting environment to have to solve problems that you know about, because there are all kinds of problems you don't even know about it. And you want to just be able to down select to those, when you start a company. So I think a lot of what we do in sort of the medical space follows pilot scale deployments that we've already done on patients in a hospital setting. We're working with the physicians and nurses to understand what the technology needs to do, what the unmet needs are, and kind of work out as many things as we can in that kind of environment, but before launching. And next week we'll be announcing a new entity at Northwestern to facilitate at an even higher level that kind of engagement, because I think it really de-risk things when you've launched a startup. So some people may have a different idea about that. You got to launch quickly. There's a limited window. Got to go fast. But I don't know. That hasn't been great for me. I think my postdoctoral advisor had a nice quote to sort of encapsulate it, because I think it reflected his ideas around this as well. He said, in startups, it's great to be opportunistic, but it's much better to have a product that works at a low cost point. So, yeah. So anyway, that's kind of the way I think about it.
Hey, so we're going to shift to talk about some industry trends, and I love the example that you gave, earlier about the original MC10. Did I have that right? Mm-hmm. MC10. You were going to have this, ability to track patients through their whole continuum of their life, and it's almost like that idea was like 15 years too early or something, because in the healthcare space, this whole longevity and aging in place is all becoming relevant, and we're moving from this world of really episodic monitoring to continuous monitoring. And so there's a lot that you can do with bioelectronics and with the companies that you've started, and also the research that's happening in your lab. So how do you think about that as a trend, and how that informs some of the work that you're doing and some of the work your students are bringing forward today?
Yeah, I mean, I think the time is right now. Of course, I'm probably biased on this, but I think there's going to be tremendous value in continuous monitoring. And now, unlike the MC10 days, there's a rapidly emerging infrastructure for dealing with all of this data, AI and machine learning and all this stuff. And from the standpoint of the medical community, I think one of the bright aspects of the pandemic, it created tremendous awareness in the capability for remote patient monitoring. And I think maybe to a degree that wasn't there prior to the pandemic. So I think the medical community is ready for it. The electronic healthcare systems and machine learning tools are now available. The technology is there. So, I mean, I see all of that coming together in a very, very powerful way that will reduce costs and improve, outcomes for patients. And one of the, sort of obvious things that maybe you don't think about is there's a lot of cost associated with every single hospital day for managing a patient. And if you can get them out of the hospital just a day or two early, tremendous cost benefit to doing that. And I think the ability to sort of track people remotely with the same fidelity that they're being monitored when they're in the hospital will allow for that. And it'll free beds, right? And it'll create additional capacity and cost benefit. So I think not only deeper insights into health status, developing data streams that will allow for a predictive assessment of health trajectory rather than just an instantaneous evaluation of health stat. All kinds of things are going to be very exciting coming out of this. And, we kind of have a company in this space. There are a couple of others too, so it's not just us, but I think there's momentum building in that direction. And I don't want to get political. I mentioned Biden before. I don't want to keep going with that. But RFK Jr. is talking about a vision where everybody is wearing a device, right? And I don't know, when that will materialize. We're really focused on patients who really need the monitoring. So it's not a nice to have, it's like essential to the care of those patients. I think that's the best place to start, but this more aggressive vision of everybody being monitored all the time. I mean, it's opt-in, obviously, not required. I think that's kind of, potentially where things are going. That's what RFK Jr. thinks anyway.
So instead of getting a vaccine, you get a monitoring device.
don't want to get into the mandates discussion.
So in addition to this continuous monitoring, are there other applications that you're looking at in your lab that you're comfortable to talk about that you think are new and emerging spaces that get you excited and out of bed in the morning?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think as an academic, you need to be working on kind of lunatic fringe stuff as well as things that have a straightforward path, near-term set of opportunities for commercialization. So I would say all the skin interface stuff fits into that kind of bucket. But, we like to work on kind of over-the-horizon stuff as well. And one of the areas that we're particularly excited about, and we've been working in this space for a while, is the idea of implantable devices that are uniquely characterized by their ability to resorb in the body, so dissolve away without a trace. So you think about a resorbable suture as being a device of that type, but just providing kind of a dumb mechanical function to hold a wound site closed until the wound's healed, don't need the suture anymore, dissolves away. dissolves away. But as a material science, over the years, we've developed a complete set of materials that can support advanced electronic functionality with that same characteristic. So you can do all sorts of things in sensing and stimulation, wireless communication, power supply. All of that can be embodied in devices that implant into the body and serve a temporary function aligned to a natural biological process. And so as one specific example of that, we're working with cardiologists at our medical school who do cardiac surgeries with patients who demand temporary pacing functionality during the postoperative recovery period, where the patients are at risk for bradycardia. So the heart rate can drop below a threshold level that could lead to mortality. And so to mitigate that risk.
Today, it's a device that comes out of the body completely and is charged outside of the body. So that your idea would be to take that completely internal.
That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, this project is like most of the projects we have in sort of medical technology space, in the sense that the opportunity was brought to us by cardiac surgeons, because I'd never even heard of anything like a temporary pacemaker. It's like, what are you talking about? Pacemaker goes in for the life of the patient, right? Do you have to replace the batteries? No. It's basically a lead that goes in. They implant it at the tail end of the surgery. The patient's opened up anyway. It's a lead that interfaces with the endocardial or epicardial tissue. And then it comes transcutaneously out of the patient and connects to a power supply, like you were saying. So it physically tethers the patient, restricts mobility. But worse is that once the patient is recovered, don't need that temporary pacing lead anymore. It has to be pulled out. And you would say, well, what's the big deal? It's just a wire, you pull it out. The problem is that when it's in the body of the patient for 2-3 weeks during that recovery process, a fibrotic tissue forms around it. So when you pull it out, you tear the scar tissue, but sometimes you tear the healthy cardiac tissue as well, in which case you induce an internal bleed that can also lead to severe complications. And so I always like to tell an anecdote. Neil Armstrong actually passed away associated with complications associated with the removal of his temporary pacemaker after a double bypass surgery. And so he bled out and died as a result of that. And so the idea is get rid of the transcutaneous wire, get rid of the external power supply, replace that all with a fully implantable device that can be addressed from the outside of the patient and activated as necessary to eliminate the risk for extraction and eliminate the constraint on the patient mobility. So we developed a super tiny, it's the world's smallest pacemaker for that application. So it's a super tiny resorbable stimulator that's light activated. So a patch goes on the surface of the chest. It monitors cardiac rhythm. If the cardiac rhythm drops below a threshold level, it lights up near infrared LEDs. Those LEDs flash on and off, and that defines the pacing rate because it's an optical switch associated with a tiny device. So anyway, that's kind of a space we're interested in. We think of it as like a bioelectronic medicine. I mean, it's like a medicine in the sense that it's providing a therapeutic function, but it's not in the body forever, just like a drug. It's eventually kind of expelled from the body, but operating based on engineering principles rather than on biochemistry.
And I think that received wide press as well. In fact, it was named Time Magazine's best inventions of the year in the medical space, right?
Yeah.
So, which is exciting, right?
Yeah.
So
this guy did his homework over here.
well, I actually have invested in a company that was also in that article, and I was like, wait, I know John Rogers. So, which is pretty exciting. I get this vision of you going into work every day and sitting and looking at your phone and it just ringing off the hook because of all this prolific work that you're doing, and it's a unique situation. How do you determine which of those phone calls to take seriously? Because you're in a unique position. I don't know anyone else like you that gets to take all these inbound calls of interest and publish papers from not only you, but your staff, which you've got an incredibly talented group of people, obviously, that you work with. How do you decide which of these calls to sort of follow up on and take seriously?
Yeah, it is sort of weird. I mean, we are somewhat unique, and I don't want to ascribe that to any particular talent that I have, but maybe just an interest and a willingness to work on these type of topics. I was at Stanford just a couple of months ago, giving a talk at their medical school, kind of what we're up to, and meeting with the physicians during the course of the day. I was asking a couple of them, Stanford's engineering college is co-located with their medical school, and I asked them, how many of you guys interact with the engineers here at Stanford? How many of you are like, co-developing devices? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I'm like, what in the heck is going on over here? Why not? I don't know why not, actually. So anyway, yeah, that's basically our slide. So we're all of our, so again, we have kind of over the horizon kind of wild stuff that we're working on. I would say that's probably 1/3 of what we're up to in this kind of medical device space. The other 2/3 are connected directly to a clinical collaborator who's approached us with an unmet need that they're struggling with in the care of their patient. And so then your question is, how do we select which of those clinicians to work with? Because it's all inbound. I'm not, running around selling technology. It's not the way we do it. So there are three buckets. So I probably get an email per day, something on that order. I mean, it's not like ringing off the hook, but enough, right? And probably too much to really take on all of it. One bucket would be somebody approaches us, physician, he has a problem, talk through it, and it's pretty clear that problem could be solved by hacking together a device in your garage. It could be advanced piece of plumbing or carpentry, something kind of in that domain. It's not aligned with academic research. Could be very important. Somebody should probably do that, maybe a commercial opportunity, but it's not aligned with what my PhD students need to do and publish and write a thesis and stuff. So that doesn't work. The other end of the spectrum, I think clinicians, medical doctors are very, very smart. Sometimes they don't have an in-depth understanding of thermodynamics and physics, so they come with an idea that's just like totally impossible. Like, you cannot do that. There's no possible. So you kind of discard that. And so you're looking for something in that sweet spot in between those two limiting cases. And you're also looking for something in that space that also aligns with something that we have that's differentiated and unique relative to other academic groups or relative to other companies. And so, you kind of apply those criteria and down select. And so, like I said, we probably have 30, 40 different kind of projects going on that are in that area. It's been great. I mean, the medical community here is just really fantastic. I mean, I love physicians, nurses even more, actually, because they know what really works from a practical standpoint. And if you don't generate a technology that the nurses love and that makes their lives easier, it's not going to fly. It absolutely won't work, no matter how much the doctors love it. If the nurses don't love it, it's not going to work. So we love to interact with the nurses. They know what works in a practical sense, but the community here is just fantastic. It was a little bit of a hypothesis moving from University of Illinois to here, hoping that, getting engaged with this medical community would be great. It's like absolutely fantastic. I mean, I kind of like doctors because they're very oriented around solving problems. And I think that's where the best engineers are oriented also. So it's really that alignment. Even though the language is different, the background's different, the goals are the same, and so I think it forms a really fantastic base for collaborative work.
Well, in the spirit of collaboration, I want to just thank John for being here tonight. So if everyone could please give John a big round of applause. And then in the spirit of further collaboration, we'd love to give you guys all a chance to ask John a few questions with some wonderful door prizes. So, maybe this was the first hand I saw go up. If you want to ask your question.
Thank you.
I've had my back to you guys the whole time. Sorry.
No problem. One thing that you mentioned during your talk was that you've had some phenomenal success getting media attention for specifically the papers that you're writing. And it's kind of curious, is there anything do you feel there's anything in how you're presenting your work or anything in your outreach that's helping encourage that kind of coverage?
It's a good question. It's always hard to know what the popular press is going to pick up on. I mean, a lot of things, we don't use this as an overriding consideration on our research, but I think a lot of cases, if it's visually interesting if it's visually appealing, I think that really captures the attention in some cases.
The
of the
MoMA
popular
example
product.
takes
yeah,
that.
you know, these
Right.
devices are pretty cool, you know, and so people want to learn more. And they know if they write a story on the technology, has a really cool picture, that's going to attract, so we don't do like explicit marketing in that sense, but I think looking back on our stuff, a lot of the things that, you have little tiny pacemakers next to a grain of rice. It's like, oh, that's really cool, and people want to write a story on that. Or you have this funky, microfluidic thing, all the different colors, and it's flexible and all this stuff. Or you have like a kid's temporary tattoo, like electronics on the skin, and you twist the skin, and the device kind of follows all the wrinkles and stuff. Or you have a picture of the devices on a neonate. It's just compelling, to people like the general public. So I would say that's part of it. The other part of it, I think, is I've been doing this for a quarter century, so people kind of know me. And so they're maybe keeping an eye out a little bit. I don't know that for sure, but probably it's a little bit easier for me and my group to get attention compared to like a brand new assistant professor doesn't have like a long
I'll
history of
second
work
that,
in
just in
this
case
space.
you were wondering. If you needed validation, not from me, but just in general. Another question?
Yeah, here we go. So somebody needs to hand these out.
Gentleman here, you want to?
Thank you, John. Just before I ask my question, a quick clarifying question. Would you consider most of the things that you develop MEMS and NEMS devices?
Oh, we do a little bit in MEMS. Some of the MEMS components appear as sort of miniaturized commercial elements within the systems that we're building. So we did some work on resorbable MEMS, back to this idea of sort of bioresorbable transient electronics, but MEMS work specifically is probably not a dominating theme in the sense of things that we're doing in my group. There are probably more famous groups that are known for MEMS technologies, besides ours.
Thank you. Yeah, the other question, my main question was, and thanks for clarifying that. In your process of developing a new product, where does manufacturability come into consideration? When do you start to think about manufacturability?
Right up front. Yeah, you have to do it. Because I think there are a lot of things you can build by hand in some kind of form of craftsmanship, and that's not going to be scalable. So, the other thing that we have that's a little bit unique at Northwestern is this institute. I think I'd mentioned it before. It has this endowment. So not only does that allow us to do scaled production, we actually have manufacturing tools in our lab. I mean, you got this facility like blows us away in a sense. But if you look at other academic groups, they don't have that. And so, yeah, we're very fortunate in that sense. We think about a lot about manufacturability. The program with Gates, they were interested in it, but they wanted to first see a cost breakdown, the BOM and also the manufacturing costs, because getting into LMICs, if it's not cost effective, it's irrelevant. So we really had to think in that project specifically about manufacturing costs as kind of a dominating consideration. Almost think of it as like an engineering performance metric, the cost basis. These things as well, because they're just single use. Each patch is single use, and you get to try one out, I guess. But because once it fills with sweat, we think it's a little messy, try to clean it out and reuse it. So they have to be low cost. And so we have a continuous reel-to-reel process to make these things. And they look relatively simple. There's actually 8 layers involved in the device. So it's fairly non-trivial, I would say, from a manufacturing standpoint. But that roll-to-roll, high volume capacity allows you to drive the cost down to something more comparable to the materials cost rather than the manufacturing cost.
So unfortunately, neither John or I are Oprah, so you're not all going to get a sweat patch. But we do have one more person. I'm going to go here, gentleman here, if you want to. And sorry for those that I didn't select. You can find John afterwards.
Thank you. This is maybe a little more personal, but I noticed that you have a ring on your right hand. Is that a monitoring device?
No, this is a Eagle Scout ring.
Okay.
I got
great.
this when I was in high school. Got Eagle Scouts, so
If
still
not,
wearing it.
Yeah. Would you recommend that people wear something like that, or do you have a favorite?
So people ask me, why don't you have like an Apple Watch or a Whoop or something like that? My wrist is too small. It's like I have really skinny wrists, so I just have a cheap Casio on.
Well, that's the preferred watch of academic and
Oh, is that
researchers.
right? Yeah. Well,
Casio watch.
It's like $15 or something like that. Very cost effective.
It's-
No, I mean, I think Apple Watch, has FDA now around blood pressure, and that's exciting. And I think it's great. I think for the wrist and the finger, it's probably going to be for sort of tracking health for people who are otherwise more or less healthy. I don't think those technologies will ever be applicable for hospital grade, like ICU grade monitoring, because they lack that intimate skin interface. It's rattling around on your wrist or your fingers, all kinds of noise artifacts that follow from that. It's not a good, persistent coupling. So, I like, obviously I'm working on it, but more like adhesive patches placed on a part of the anatomy that's relevant for the monitoring functionality, not relevant for convenience, which is what's dominating the consideration for the wrist and the finger. So, yeah. One of these, yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate, one of the things that big takeaways from the night was really you've got John's group and thinking of approaching what he does and having this, on one side, things that you could do in the garage, that might not be a fit, and then things that are in the realm of impossible. And it sounds like everything else in between is, capable or that's in the realm of possibilities. And I think that just goes to define John as a person of what his mind is capable of. And so just a real treat for us to have an opportunity to sort of look inside the mind of someone that does look at the world with such a wide scope and lens. So with that as a closing comment, I just want to thank the mHUB folks again. I really want to thank John for sharing your experiences. And I know we're going to be around for a few more minutes at a reception, but thank you very much, and good luck to the next Innovators Disruptors Forum event. And thank you guys for all your attention tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.